right now. As I said at the previous hearing of this subcommittee, I intend for it to be a primary forum for both shaping and articulating the policies of the United States towards Africa. I believe that China is a global threat that must be confronted globally. And that means region by region, territory by territory, and nation by nation. The challenges posed by China and Africa are vast. However, there are also immense opportunities for advancing America's national security interests. Today's hearing focuses on China's dominance of critical minerals in Africa and on the importance of strengthening U.S.-Africa partnerships to secure the United States supply chain of critical minerals. We face acute threats to those supply chains, and there are enormous opportunities for American businesses to flourish in Africa. For years, the Chinese Communist Party has been working systematically to dominate Africa's critical mineral sector. China is pouring billions into its Belt and Road Initiative. It uses infrastructure loans to trap African nations in debt and then leverages that debt to secure mining rights, as it does in so many other contexts to advance Chinese interests. China has gained control over cobalt, lithium, and other rare earth minerals in countries like the Democratic Republic of Congo, Tanzania, and Zimbabwe. The CCP's activities have enabled China to attain a dominant global role in the processing and refinement of critical minerals and to dramatically influence global supply chains, availability, and prices. Today, China refines more than 70% of the world's cobalt and controls a vast share of rare earth processing. That should alarm every American because it means the economy, the energy transition, and even the defense supply chains depend on the Chinese Communist Party. The United States relies heavily on China to refine critical minerals, even those that originate in Africa. It is a glaring, persistent, and acute national security threat. No doubt, wherever possible, we should be seeking to onshore our critical minerals supply chain. In my home state of Texas, there are bold initiatives taking place to ensure that for certain minerals, the entire chain is in the United States, from mining through manufacturing. Those projects are ongoing and will expand significantly, but it would be reckless not to simultaneously seek partners abroad to build reliable supply chains, including and especially in Africa. Under the Trump administration, and thanks to President Trump's leadership, that is exactly what the United States is doing, and that will be the focus of this hearing. Creating opportunities for American companies to enter the African market and to build lasting partnerships is essential to shaping a more secure future in Africa. The extraction, processing and refining, and manufacturing of critical minerals is complex, but it is also an opportunity to shape U.S. and to reshape U.S.-Africa relations from aid-based to investment-led engagement. One of our most promising opportunities is the Lobito Corridor, which has emerged as a strategic alternative to China's Belt and Road. Minerals and security are directly linked to the U.S. national interest. In the DRC and Rwanda, tensions over mineral-rich regions have fueled regional instability for decades. The upcoming peace agreement and the new regional economic integration framework presents a rare opportunity to achieve stability while securing access to strategic resources. But if we fail to act now, China will be able to shut the United States out of Africa entirely. That is unacceptable. The administration is pursuing an emerging commercial diplomatic strategy. We are providing tools and demonstrating to our African partners that America is a reliable partner. U.S. businesses should be integrated into the strategy and work in tandem with commercial advocacy. I look forward to hearing today's witnesses, the Honorable Jonathan Pratt and Scott Woodard, testify on this important issue. And with that, I now recognize Ranking Member Booker for his opening statement.
I'm really grateful to the chairman for working together and leading this committee. To the two gentlemen before me, I just want to say you all have had long careers of dedicated public service. You are patriots in every sense of the word. I'm grateful for how you've dedicated not only your lives, but obviously your family has made quite a commitment to this country as well. It's great to have you here today. I am just very eager to have this conversation with two folks who are career folks, not involved in politics, because we should really be talking about the urgencies that the chairman just spoke to. You know, critical minerals are really the building block of the 21st century as we are screaming to a new age, from smartphones to semiconductors to electric vehicle batteries, renewable energy technologies. These resources are really going to be the central source that's going to drive economic growth and innovations that many of us here in this room can't even imagine that are going to come. It also is critical for helping to lower costs for people in the United States and around the world. We need to make sure we have a policy and a strategy. It's also very vital for our military readiness and our industrial competitiveness. But as my colleague has said, China has not only expanded its foreign sourcing of critical minerals, it has also developed a near monopoly in the processing and refinement of critical minerals, enabling it to exert influence over global supply chains, availability, and pricing. We are in a crisis, and not enough people recognize the crisis that we're in. It demands action. We know the strategic importance of these materials, but I believe the United States is trailing behind in this global competition and not exercising its strength, power, and focus. As a result, I believe we must develop a comprehensive U.S. strategy on critical minerals that reflects our values, protects our interests and supply chains, strengthens our partnerships, and reduces barriers for investment. Building U.S.-Africa partnerships when it comes to critical minerals is key for a common-sense, pragmatic strategy. And there is abundant opportunity to do so. Having traveled around the continent, I see how those countries, so many of them are more inclined to work with us, partner with us because of our values, because of our ideals. They do not want to partner with China. But when we create a vacuum, China rushes to fill it. The African continent is home to nearly 30% of the world's known critical mineral reserves, including minerals and other materials essential for the technologies that I've mentioned. But our posture in the continent right now is far from where it needs to be. First and foremost, we need to do a much better job in deepening those partnerships, building the trust, grounded in mutual respect, democratic values, and long-term opportunity for them and us to strengthen joint security and mutual prosperity. We need to do that in a way that makes the United States their partner of choice. It already is, but we have to make that bridge, that avenue open. We need to provide an alternative to China and Russia, who are moving so aggressively to secure access, influence, without regard to the governments or communities that are impacted. My frustration with the Trump administration, having talked to so many members, is that they clearly do not have a strategy. But what's worse is they are undermining the progress that we have made on this committee in a bipartisan way in trying to deal with this urgency. I've heard the urgency of commercial diplomacy from the Trump administration folks who have sat in hearings. I believe in commercial diplomacy. I've seen the power of it firsthand in my visits to the continent. But commercial diplomacy without a larger strategic plan, without proper funding, staffing, and programming doesn't do much. It sounds like nice rhetoric, but it doesn't offer real change, is what we need right now in this crisis. The State Department has implemented changes, though, that have also undercut our competitiveness when it comes to strengthening relationships and securing supply chains. Let me give you some examples. The Trump administration has proposed a 76% cut to the Millennium Challenge Corporation, again, bipartisan support, one of our most valuable tools to support critical infrastructure throughout Africa, including developing mineral supply chains. My colleague rightfully talked about the importance of the Libido corridor. Well, while Congress reviews the proposal, the Trump administration went ahead and terminated the MCC compact with Zambia. This compact was directly linked to our joint efforts along the Libido Corridor, a project designed to create the first westward-facing critical mineral supply chain in Africa. That is unconscionable. The administration has not continued Prosper Africa. I've talked to the chairman of this committee who is committed to that. It was a bipartisan initiative launched under the first Trump administration and connected U.S. businesses with African companies and markets, but again, it's being abandoned, even though we all know the difference it's made. The Trump administration terminated the very governance and economic support that would help African partners and, more importantly, or as importantly, improve the business climate to increase access for U.S. companies. The Trump administration terminated labor, environmental, and peace-building programs that supported vulnerable communities in conflict areas where critical minerals become a source of corruption, violence, and destruction. The Trump administration stopped the U.S. geological surveys in African countries to help locate and map the extent of critical minerals. The Trump administration stopped, quote, countering PRC influence, end quote, funding that addressed illicit mining in countries like Nigeria. The Trump administration fired over 1,300 employees at the State Department with critical expertise, some of whom were focused on critical minerals and some of whom had owned onward assignments to critical African posts, where there are already significant staffing shortages. The Trump administration has not nominated appointees for key positions, haven't even put the nominees forward, including an assistant secretary for African affairs. To date, the administration has only nominated one ambassador to serve in an African country. China's diplomatic presence is running laps around the United States of America. They are savoring our lack of action, our retreat, our undermining our business interests, our compromising our security, and are not seizing on a strategy for critical minerals. We need a real strategy, a strategy that would support true bilateral relationships, that would empower local economies and communities to create better long-term partners and markets for U.S. companies, that would staff our embassies, that every embassy I visited say that the opposition, or China, outmatches them in so many ways. Africa is not just a source of raw materials, it is a rising global force in the world economy. It is a central partner for today and a vital, critical partner for tomorrow. And so yes, I hear the lip service. We must increase U.S. commercial investment opportunities, but you can't undercut a lot of the structures this committee has built in a bipartisan way to support that commercial success. We got to be smart, not blind with extractive ambition, but with mutual respect and strategic foresight that create wins-wins for African countries, nations, and peoples, and American strength, security, and economic might. We must focus on long-term opportunities to reduce nations' reliance on China, address business climate challenges, create good-paying jobs at home and abroad, strengthen our industrial base, boost the credibility of our leadership, businesses, and partnership. Sadly, instead, the Trump administration is systematically undermining our ability to do so by terminating or ignoring the resources Congress in a bipartisan way has provided to better accomplish these goals. What is the strategy? What should be the strategy? We see the urgencies. We see the crisis. I hope this conversation is constructive to us getting to the bottom of ways that this committee, in a bipartisan way, can address the galling gaps. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Ambassador Pratt, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chairman Cruz, Ranking Member Booker, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today on the administration's strategy for securing critical minerals and expanding sustainable, secure, and transparent supply chains in Africa. Critical minerals are essential to the United States' economic prosperity, national security, and technological leadership. Yet our reliance on foreign nations for processing and refining these minerals poses a threat to our supply chains and industrial capacity. Africa is central to our strategy to address this challenge. The continent is home to vast reserves of critical minerals, including cobalt, lithium, tantalum, and graphite, which are indispensable technologies for technologies such as batteries and semiconductors. Africa's substantial natural resource endowment provides an opportunity for the United States to increase its supply chain security. The administration's approach prioritizes partnerships with African nations to ensure their minerals flow west, not east to China. China's dominance in global mineral supply chains, specifically in processing and refining, is a threat to both U.S. and African interests. Executive Order 14156, declaring a national energy emergency, and Executive Order 14241, immediate measures to increase American mineral production, outline the administration's approach to address vulnerabilities in the critical mineral supply chain. The State Department and the Bureau of African Affairs play a role in a whole-of-government approach by identifying strategic opportunities on the African continent. This strategy is essential for achieving long-term, sustainable, critical mineral security. Successful implementation requires consistent interagency coordination to ensure these opportunities are accurately identified, supported, and de-risked through U.S. government financing mechanisms, such as the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation and the U.S. Export-Import Bank. The United States is committed to making targeted investments in infrastructure to facilitate the export of minerals from Africa to global markets. A prime example is the Lobito Corridor, which provides an alternative to Chinese-controlled transportation routes. The DFC plays a critical role in financing this project, ensuring it is economically viable and strategically secure. We urge Congress to reauthorize the DFC by October. DFC support is essential to making these investments financially viable for U.S. companies in Africa. These projects not only secure mineral supply chains, but also foster economic growth and regional stability in Africa. The Bureau of African Affairs is working to create the conditions for investment in Africa's mining sector. Following the U.S. brokered peace agreement between the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Rwanda, we created an economic framework for increased U.S. private sector investment in the DRC's critical mineral sector. Last year, the DRC produced nearly 76% of the world's cobalt, most of which was exported to China because Chinese firms own or have stakes in 15 of the DRC's 19 major copper cobalt mines and account for 3/4 of global cobalt refining capacity. Africa's critical minerals are not just a resource. By investing in infrastructure, fostering private sector growth, and in advancing regional stability, we can build a future of shared prosperity. The administration is committed to this vision and to ensuring that the United States remains a trusted partner in Africa's growth and progress. Thank you for your consideration, and I welcome your questions.
Thank you. Mr. Woodard, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman Cruz, Ranking Member Booker, distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for giving me the opportunity to testify today on the administration's approach to securing critical mineral supply chains, including the role African states can play in enhancing the security of these supply chains for the United States. Simply put, we face a two-pronged challenge. To achieve the reindustrialization of the United States that this administration has put at the center of its economic policy, we need to encourage more mining and more processing of the critical materials that form the backbone of any modern, prosperous economy. Second, we need to diversify the supply chains of these materials away from China. China has gone to great lengths to dominate key parts of these supply chains, making it imperative that we do more to reduce the threat to U.S. security and prosperity. The team I lead at the State Department has been driving these issues for several years. Previously, within the Bureau of Energy Resources, and now as part of the Bureau of Economic, Energy, and Business Affairs after the recent reorganization at State. We have collaborated closely with the State Department's regional bureaus, including the Bureau of African Affairs, with our embassy personnel stationed overseas, and with other involved agencies across the U.S. government to tackle the challenges China has imposed on this sector. We have worked to identify and marshal support for projects across the globe that help our supply chains of these minerals and ensure that American producers and consumers have the supplies they require. We all understand how dependent the United States, alongside its allies and partners around the world, has become on China for the mining and processing of critical minerals. That dependence exposes our national security, our industries, and ultimately our consumers to the effects of economic coercion and supply chain disruptions that China has proven all too willing to exploit. China's refined minerals and components containing them are the product of heavily subsidized, vertically integrated supply chains that benefit from Beijing's willingness to ignore labor, environmental, and other protections for local workers and communities, resulting in artificially low prices. Erratic Chinese export controls and price manipulation also contribute to a warped and difficult market for minerals and the products derived from them. All of this makes the economically viable development of any mining or processing projects outside of Chinese control challenging at best. It reduces the appetite among Western operators to invest. It discourages potential private sector investors from backing these projects around the world. The administration has devoted a great deal of attention to critical minerals since January. A major focus of that attention has been on the need to increase domestic mining, extraction, and refining of these minerals wherever possible. As we engage with countries on a bilateral basis and through various regional groupings, we have emphasized to them the opportunities that exist for investment in projects based here in the United States. Even with the vast resources of the United States, however, there will be minerals and metals our economy needs that we do not have, particularly in the short to medium term. The President's executive orders recognize the importance of working with like-minded allies and others, another important element of my team's work. Our embassies and personnel on the ground in these countries serve as a valuable resource for American companies looking to invest and participate in these projects overseas and bring these minerals back to the United States. Our embassies connect them with key officials in the host country governments and help them navigate business environments that can be very difficult. We often find these foreign governments are eager to work with American companies. These foreign governments want non-Chinese options. We work to facilitate conversations between critical minerals project operators and potential sources of finance, including the Export-Import Bank, the International Development Finance Corporation, and a range of private sector financial institutions. We have also approached these challenges from a regional perspective, including through such groupings as the Quad, joining with Australia, India, and Japan to support projects that will meet our shared needs. Africa is central to our efforts due to its vast mineral reserves, and my team has worked side by side with our colleagues in the African Affairs Bureau in pursuit of projects that will benefit our own supply chains and support the administration's approach of building up trade with our African partners rather than leaving them shackled to dependence on aid. Supporting these projects, building up these supply chains, and investing our time and effort into these relationships will benefit us all and bring greater security and prosperity to the United States. Thank you for your attention, and I look forward to discussing these efforts more with the subcommittee.
Thank you, gentlemen. Ambassador Pratt, the Chinese Communist Party takes a whole-of-government and, frankly, whole-of-nation approach to advancing its national security interests. They use every tool they have, diplomacy, state-backed financing, state-owned enterprises, and even military leverage to gain control over critical minerals, especially in Africa, where some of the richest minerals are found. It is in the vital national security interest of the United States to ensure open and competitive access to critical minerals and materials. Our dependence on China for critical minerals is quite simply dangerous. Critical minerals power our defense, technology, space, and energy sectors. To put it bluntly, an F-35 requires about 900 pounds of rare earth elements, and a Virginia-class submarine needs over 9,000 pounds. Yet to meet these needs, we're forced to rely on China. That's completely unacceptable. The CCP has spent years deliberately building control over global critical mineral supply chains. Today, they control major mining operations across the Democratic Republic of Congo and much of the continent. That's not just investment, it's control, it's dominance, and it comes at the expense of our African partners while harming U.S. national interests. Ambassador Pratt, can you talk a bit about how China has been able to outmaneuver the United States in securing critical minerals with a breakdown by region in Africa?
Thank you very much, Senator. I agree completely with the premise for your question. China has engaged in behavior that is corrupt, number one, with a lot of bribes and payoffs to secure agreements that favor their own companies. And they've also taken advantage of unfair labor practices to their own advantage, while also engaging in monopolistic behavior that has manipulated prices to the disadvantage of American companies. We have pursued a strategy of trying to break down this monopolistic behavior, especially in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, by taking advantage of the peace agreement that we negotiated over the last few months and ensuring that there was an economic element to it and that we would be able to deliver for U.S. companies in the DRC, specific to the critical minerals that you mentioned. Across the continent, you were briefed by my colleague Troy Futrell last month about our commercial strategy. We are adding to that our critical minerals strategy to ensure that U.S. companies have the access that they need in West Africa, Central Africa, East and South Africa. And we want to use mechanisms that exist like the DFC to achieve this, but mainly by getting in with the heads of state and ensuring that U.S. companies who have requested our assistance get the assistance that they deserve.
So moving on to you, Mr. Woodard. As I alluded earlier, China's control over critical mineral supply chains has affected our national security posture on a global scale. We all saw this play out during the COVID-19 pandemic. It was a wake-up call to Americans realizing how much our economy is intertwined with China's in ways that many had not seen before. The CCP knows this, and they've spent decades securing control over global critical mineral supply chains as part of their broader civil-military fusion strategy to threaten our security interests. Please briefly describe the scope of China's critical mineral dominance from extraction to refining to downstream production, and how that poses strategic risks to the U.S. economy and military.
Thank you, Senator, and your question really gets at the heart of the matter for sure. So China has spent a lot of time and effort and resources to lock down key supply chains, particularly the processing part of the supply chain in many minerals. So in some cases, graphite, for example, it's nearly 100% of the global supply will come through China at some point to be processed. And people unfamiliar with this may not recognize how close to home some of this can hit. So for example, if you look at cobalt, China has spent a lot of effort overproducing cobalt, and that has damaged mining projects here in the United States. In Idaho, for example, there are some mines in Idaho that can't operate because the price is too low, and that is a clear and direct result of Chinese monopolies in the DRC overproducing, damaging our people here in the United States. And this is another example of why we need to engage in Africa to thwart what China is trying to do and engage there with our embassies and personnel.
So to both of you, what can and should be done about this? How can we take back control of critical minerals throughout the supply chain?
Senator, thank you. We were very eager to take advantage of direct outreach from multiple major U.S. companies right at the beginning of this administration who wanted us to engage in the DRC and help them secure deals with that government. We simultaneously were receiving requests from the head of state of the DRC that they wanted U.S. companies to be involved. We linked this with our diplomatic strategy to pursue peace talks and host them. which these companies also requested that we do. And we've been supporting these American companies to secure deals on the very minerals that you listed in your briefing.
Chairman, I'd emphasize a point that I think Senator Booker made in his opening comments, which is that in many cases we're pushing on an open door in many of these countries in Africa. I was at the Mining Indaba in Cape Town in February, which is Africa's largest mining conference. And to a person, all of the African leaders there I spoke about mentioned two things. One, the importance of what they called local beneficiation, which is trying to secure more of the value locally for them so that these countries can benefit from the geological patrimony that they have. But the second was that they want a choice. They are tired of just having China be the only option for them. So by us engaging with U.S. and like-minded companies in these countries, having our ambassadors be active on this front in African countries, we can make a real difference going forward, especially when we combine that with other tools like the things that DFC and XM are doing, the projects they're supporting as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Ranking Member Booker.
Absolutely not. I think Daines should go because you and I are going to be here all day. You should stick and move, as they say, my friend.
All right. Ranking Member Booker, thank you. And Chairman Cruz, thank you as well. I'm very pleased this hearing is being held today. It's very timely for what's going on in Montana, and let me describe what's happening. And before engaging on this topic, I want to take a moment to recognize a community at the Stillwater Mine in Montana. That's a palladium and platinum producer. As we confront these pressing geopolitical and economic threats at the mine, it's the people on the ground, the hardworking folks and their families. They're truly the heart of the community. And this past weekend, there was a tragic loss of life incident at the Stillwater Mine. Our hearts break for the family and all those involved. There was an electrician, there was an electrical related incident that sadly resulted in a fatality. As you know, when that kind of thing happens, it's a gut punch to everybody. It's a wonderful operation. Been there. Leadership is fantastic. It's been a tough several days. We'll be working closely with the mine and the federal regulators to reaffirm our commitment for a safe and secure future for everybody at the mine and the broader community at large. Well, today's hearing is on U.S. mining and investment in Africa. My questions are going to be a little bit different lane here, focused on mining in the United States as relates to the geopolitical situation. There are 3 locations in the world that mine platinum and palladium. Very important components for catalytic converters found in automobiles. The 3 places are Russia, South Africa, and Montana. In Montana, the Stillwater and East Boulder mines are the only primary producers of platinum and palladium in the United States. And right now, they're being targeted by dumping from the Russians. For over a year, Russia has been dumping palladium on the market to drive down prices in hopes of closing the mines in Montana and making the United States dependent on Russians for this critical mineral. The irony behind all this is they're dumping palladium in the United States, driving the price down. The mine had to lay off 700 workers because of the low prices. And yet we're buying Russian palladium to help fund Vladimir Putin's war against Ukraine. If we don't act soon, this crisis is only going to grow greater, and we're going to see the reality then, a new reality, a sad reality of dependence on Russia for palladium instead of a Montana mine. Mr. Woodard and Mr. Pratt, the Montana platinum and palladium mines are owned and operated by the Sibanye-Stillwater, which are headquartered in South Africa. This partnership has ensured the United States and South Africa can continue to produce critical minerals even when prices are low. But the market manipulation by the Russians is a national security threat and one that we should aggressively counter. And that's why I've introduced a Senate Bill 808, the Stop Russian Market Manipulation Act, to prohibit Russian imports of certain critical minerals. I've also urged President Trump to take action through trade remedies, sanctions, and the Defense Production Act. I'm also asking this committee to include language in the State Department reauthorization that will target Nornickel and other Russian bad actors. So my questions for Mr. Woodard and Mr. Pratt: do you agree, and I'll start with Mr. Woodard, that in order to bolster jobs, economic development, and national security in both the United States and Africa, we must take action to counter Russian illegal dumping? Mr. Woodard?
Thank you, Senator. And obviously, I'm very sorry to hear about the accident that happened at the mine. Our condolences obviously go to those affected. But your question really gets at also, the heart of the matter. It's not just China. Russia can do it too. And I think the Russians learned from what the Chinese have been doing, perhaps, on this front. When you have markets that are relatively small, like the markets are for these minerals and metals, they are subject to manipulation. And I think governments do have to pay very, very close attention to what's going on in these markets. So we've seen this administration emphasize things like emphasizing reforms that will make mining and processing easier in the United States, which could open up possibilities for greater investment, which would strengthen the capital foundation of some of these projects and allow them to compete a bit better. You've also seen at least the start of strategies like, for example, was recently announced regarding rare earths with Mountain Pass, which is a floor price, is another option that maybe the administration can consider or has considered and may consider going forward to address some of these problems. Because, you're right, these markets are able to be manipulated by malicious actors, as you pointed out.
Mr. Woodard, thank you. Ambassador Pratt?
I also offer my condolences to the families of the company involved. It was a terrible accident. I agree 100% with the question that we need to find ways to break monopolistic behavior. What we've pursued on the continent is a number of agreements for U.S. companies, but also with countries that have rare earths, including in South Africa, to ensure that we have the feedstock that we need and that it flows toward the United States, not toward China. We're working on several arrangements in West Africa right now as well. And so my piece of this coming from the Africa Bureau is to very much focus on what we can achieve with Africa in the near and medium term to get the minerals that we need while we're developing our own domestic capacity for mining and refining.
Thank you. I'm out of time here, and Senator Booker's graciously allowed me to go in front of him, but let me just make one final point before I conclude. We need the help of the administration. And I think there's a chance here, probably the quickest way to remedy this would be either a targeted sanction or a targeted tariff against Russian palladium coming to the United States. That could fix this problem quickly. As I've chatted with the mine officials, we could probably bring 500 of these jobs back in a very short period of time, and importantly, restore the supply chain of made in America palladium instead of produced in Russia. So this is where we could use the help, and it's dire right now. The sooner the better. Thank you.
Well, and Senator Daines, I will say if that comes as a result of this exchange, this will have been a productive subcommittee hearing, and we can all celebrate that. Ranking Member.
There will be, Chairman, if I might say, there will be 700 Montana families cheering to have these jobs restored. And it's just a shame that it's the Russians right now who have caused this.
Well, and understand you've got a Texan and a New Jersey
Yes.
cheering on as well.
No, but and thank you for sharing all that. It was really, first of all, moving. I'm so sorry about the loss of life, but I think more of us can understand that these are the things that join us together to fight for American jobs.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that great testimony. Gentlemen, again, I just continue to want to heap gratitude on you all. Thank you for being here with your expertise, for your testimony, and for your lifetimes of commitment in these issues, especially your experience, frankly, on the continent. Some of your testimony already, you've talked about the strategic urgencies of having the people and the places to do the work, ambassadors who have clear goals from the President of the United States, leaders who are actually making this their job every day when they get up and they go to bed. And I knew this when I ran a city. Just I wanted people being focused on the areas of strategic urgency every single day. Who owns this? Who is going to drive it forward? And I guess that's why I'm a little frustrated about our pullback diplomatically from the continent. And again, this is objective measures. The numbers of strong diplomatic corps with expertise to protect our interests every single day, and you all know this from your experience, ambassadors work with private companies in the United States, they work with the State Department, they work directly with the kind of, every day with the kind of teams that pursue the mission. But we have vacancies now that are pretty significant. We have not had a nomination for the Assistant Secretary of African Affairs, and we have not nominated one ambassador, as I said in my opening comments, to Sub-Saharan Africa. That makes a difference, and it sends a message. Am I correct, Ambassador Pratt?
We have two nominees, I believe, one for Namibia and one for South Africa that are
How many
currently in the
countries?
pipeline.
How many countries on the continent,
There are
sir?
many countries on the continent.
Dozens and dozens.
I'm responsible currently for about 46.
Okay, yes. And so that's 2 out of 46 that you're responsible for. It's a bit stunning. We've lost about 1,300 employees, and reorganization efforts are underway, though, but without meaningful consultation of Congress, which leaves me with some questions. You know, at least 2 FSOs who had onward assignments to go work directly on critical minerals at African posts were riffed. Did you know why the individuals were fired, and do you know when their positions will be filled?
I can't speak to those specific cases, Senator. What I can speak to is what we pursued in the Africa Bureau.
Well, hold on, because I do
yeah.
want to know that
Yeah.
strategy. But again, I have, you know, when I was running the city, 25% of our employees we had to riff, 25%. But we were strategic in protecting mission critical jobs like public safety in every way we could, trying to prioritize protection of those jobs. Here, with the urgencies that we've been talking about today, you know, those 2 people, I know you want to speak specifically about them, they had 30 years of experience, including advanced language skills, economic expertise. You know, I don't understand that, but I want to go through more. The reorganization efforts with 12 staff to oversee aid across Africa. You know, Secretary Rubio said that regional bureaus will be at the forefront of administrating the foreign assistance programs. But according to the congressional notification on the department's reorganization, the Bureau of African Affairs' new assistant office will have 12 people. And it just seems to me that 12 people to oversee foreign assistance across 46, 49 countries, given the urgencies and the issues we have, it raises some concerns if they have the capacity in that office when they're competing with China, who is doing an all-out assault on diplomacy, investment, increasing efforts to, as we've been talking about, to control the critical minerals coming out. Couldn't we use more staff, more people focused on this?
Thank you for the question, Senator. I'm also very concerned about staffing, as you can imagine. I was previously in the #2 slot in the Africa Bureau during the so-called reorg process, and now I'm the senior bureau official. I worked very hard with my team to protect what we have in the Africa Bureau. I'm pleased to report that in the Africa Bureau, we had 0 rifts. We presented a lot of data at the beginning of the process to demonstrate how understaffed the Africa Bureau has been historically, going back decades. And we compared ourselves to other bureaus, other regional bureaus in particular, our staffing relative to theirs and how many we support domestically compared to overseas. And that data was very compelling, and I'm pleased to say that we got a result that we were pleased with in terms of the staffing we were able to retain. I'd also like to add that we were able to add an office, which is the assistance office that you mentioned. We were able to convert a security assistance office into our broader assistance office. So we retained some staff, all of the staff that were in that office, and added the staff that you mentioned. And now we have the challenge of how we will oversee the assistance in Africa that we will be given and the various projects that will emerge. And we're in a live conversation with the Foreign Assistance Bureau on how we will achieve that. And so we're very much building this plane as we fly, but I think we're up to the challenge, and I'm really proud that we retained our staff to be able to do that.
Okay.
We also created a commercial office because we want to focus very heavily on our commercial strategy, critical minerals being a piece of that, and that's a strategy that we're also currently working on. So I'm excited about how we've used our staff to focus on our top priorities on the continent.
Well, I appreciate you noting, though, that staffing is still a concern of yours. We're going to get back to conversation, I hope, but to my right is one of the giants of the Senate, and I want to defer to her.
Ranking Member Shaheen.
Thank you very much, Chairman and Ranking Member Booker, for holding this hearing. Thank you to the witnesses for being here. I'm not sure whether I want to be a giant of the Senate. Does that mean tall or wide? I don't know.
It means
Anyway.
their stature is extraordinary.
Today, Senator Curtis and I introduced bipartisan legislation that would authorize something we're calling the Mineral Security Partnership in an effort to ensure that the State Department is prioritizing diplomatic engagement to develop trusted critical minerals supply chains and lessen our collective dependence on China. I couldn't agree more with what the chair and ranking member have had to say about critical minerals and what we must do to ensure that we have access to those. And we brought a chart here, and you really, sadly, it's not big enough for you all to see all of the fine print and for the audience to see it. But I think the important point is the top line, and that is that China owns most of the mines in production for 5 critical minerals in Africa, and we list those. What you can see is that the pink is China, and there's a lot of it, and we are not competing in the way that we need to with what China's doing. Last week, the Democrats on this committee released a report that highlights China's strategic and quick action that's replacing U.S. investments in Africa after the end of many of our foreign assistance programs. That investigation found that in September of 2024, China pledged up to $50 billion in financing for economic development and infrastructure projects in Africa over the next 3 years. And I know that the chair and I think the ranking member also mentioned the Libido Corridor. But China's actively negotiating with the Tanzania-Zambia Rail Authority on China's $1 billion investment in the Tazara Railway. China's investment in this railroad is in direct competition with the U.S. proposed investment in the Libido Corridor. Unfortunately, today, the U.S. government has yet to disperse the $553 million U.S. investment for the Libido Corridor, and I think Senator Booker talked about the efforts on the Millennium Challenge Corporation and the fact that a lot of those funds have been put on hold. So can either of you speak to why we have not dispersed the funds on the Libido Corridor and what we need to do to get that started again?
Senator, thank you. Let me just say I share your concern about disbursement, and so we're working very closely with DFC on that. Another key component that I'd like to offer to you, Senator, is ensuring that American companies are able to provide the minerals to that Libido corridor and making sure that the railroad is actually viable commercially. And one of the things that I briefed in a previous question was our excitement around the multiple U.S. companies that approached us at the beginning of this year asking for our help on the DRC peace process, which, as you know, we became directly involved in. But what was new to this is that we created an economic element, including support for mining companies and how resources would be extracted all over Congo, not just in eastern Congo where the conflict is. And so we're hoping to see in eastern Congo a formalization of the minerals that are taken out of there, including coltan. So it's not all just informal sector with a lot of exploitation of labor, but that the minerals in the southern part of the Congo, which I visited in my first tour in the Foreign Service 25 years ago, cobalt, copper, et cetera, are feeding into that libido corridor and making sure that it's commercially viable.
So I think that would be positive progress, but how does that deal with the disbursement issue?
My understanding, and I won't speak for DFC, I think some of this is probably best directed to DFC. My understanding is that there are benchmarks and it's a sort of a process for reaching the total output and outcomes of the investment. And so I defer to the experts on DFC, but I agree with you totally. We have to stick with this libido investment and the corridor and make sure that that corridor does succeed. It is absolutely critical to our strategy in Central Africa and Africa writ large.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, if I can ask one more question, even though my time is up. I think this one is for you, Deputy Assistant Secretary Woodward. One of the real impediments to U.S. critical mineral partnerships in Africa has been the processing and refinement of critical minerals. An estimated 80% of the rare earth minerals are processed in China, with the majority of African countries who are exporting the shares of those critical minerals to China. So can you give us some idea about how the U.S. is utilizing our partnerships to increase the level of processing and refinement that we would like to have take place in Africa for reach to the United States?
Sure, Senator. Thank you very much for the question. I think the question about rare earths is a very important one. And you're 100% right that China is very dominant in the processing of these materials and has on its territory large amounts of them, but not a majority. These are things, even though they're called rare earths, they're actually available in many places around the world. And so in the United States, we have a company called Mountain Pass, located about halfway between Las Vegas and Los Angeles in California. They've just received significant support from the Department of Defense, which includes an equity investment into the company. It includes a long-term offtake agreement for the rare earths that the company produces, and it includes a floor price going forward, which would help that company obtain even additional investment, because that's one of the things that's so hard for many of these projects. Mining is risky anywhere. Only about 1 in 1,000 mining projects ever really comes to fruition, which gives a sense of just the financial challenge out there, even in the best of circumstances. When you add malignant players like China, then it makes it even that much harder. And so I think that kind of strategy that we've seen there, we might see more of going forward as the administration gets more aggressive on these things.
And on the processing side?
Right, so that's part of that. So what Mountain Pass wants to do is to create an entire value chain, starting from what they dig up there in California. And I understand they have plans for the plant in Texas. Congratulations, Senator Cruz, on that. To create the processing and then eventually to the magnets, because that's what is really important about many of these rare earths, especially heavy ones. They get added to magnets that allow them to operate at higher temperatures and be more durable. That's very important. And to do that is going to require more than what Mountain Pass has, because to get the heavies, we're going to need resources other than what Mountain Pass has. And there are other potential locations and other locations around the world, and companies are really looking for that, and we are engaging with them to encourage those kind of investments to create that supply chain.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, and I would note the administration's arrangement with Mountain Pass, I think, is really innovative. Their mine in California is incredibly important, and the factory that they have built in Dallas-Fort Worth, I've been to that factory where they're building rare earth batteries right now. It's incredibly important, and their stated plans in cooperation with the administration is to increase their capacity tenfold. That's critically important for us being able to compete and beat China in this important terrain. Senator Barrasso.
Well, thanks so much, Mr. Chairman. Welcome. Ambassador Pratt, so China controls, what, 85% of the world's critical mineral processing capacity. Is in fact, China has control over a significant percentage of Africa's mining sector, and they get things there and take them to China for the processing. And we're taking steps here in the United States to break this dependence. Earlier this month, the Secretary of Energy was in Wyoming with us. The Brook Mine in Wyoming broke ground. It's the first rare earth mine to open in the U.S. in over 70 years. This is going to produce rare earths vital for defense and advanced technologies, critical. So how can the U.S. and African countries collaborate to make sure that we can build some supply chains that challenge China's dominance so that never again will we find ourselves this dependent on China or any foreign source?
Thank you, Senator. We are trying to ensure that the U.S. has the feedstock that it needs of various minerals, including cobalt, lithium, and many others. And so part of the strategy is to leverage commercial access and take advantage of the offers that we're receiving on the continent from various countries, and also to take advantage of financing through the DFC. As you may know, there's a rare earth mine in South Africa that receives DFC financing. In Mozambique, we have a graphite mine that receives DFC financing. These are examples of how we've been able to successfully use the DFC to ensure access to the minerals that we need in the U.S. While we continue to develop domestic capacity on the mining and refining side of the equation.
It just seems to me the Chinese Communist Party has been really targeting investments in African countries in order to expand their political influence, their economic influence, their strategic goals. I mean, you look at the whole Belt and Road Initiative and different things that they've done. I was in Djibouti visiting Wyoming National Guard troops. You fly in and there's this base for ships that they're building right there in this pinch point, the Gulf of Aden, where it comes down to to go up into the Red Sea. It's a narrow area and a big base there. Going into Djibouti, go through Addis Ababa, big terminal for air supply. There's a project, and the chairman knows about this with our time with Senator Inhofe, who has spent a lot of time in Ethiopia, very involved, something called Project Mercy, a hospital. Baylor medical students would go there to train and to help and to learn. And a lot of U.S. involvement there. Used to be a kind of a dirt road, and now it's a beautiful road, and the signs are brought to you by your friends from China, because they built the road. It's a U.S. active medical center that China seems to try to take control over so many areas in terms of their effort to try to go with influence, political, economic, strategic. So, you know, it seems their investments are focused on large projects and natural resources. Can you just talk about what risk these China investments in critical minerals pose to us long-term in the United States if we don't do something to counter it?
Senator, first I'd like to say thank you for mentioning Djibouti, because I served there as U.S. Ambassador for 2.5 years before this assignment, and spent much of my time advocating to try to receive more U.S. investment. We're working very closely with a U.S. company that had a large energy investment there. And I worked very closely with our own government to put money into some strategic security investments, like a peacekeeping center that we're jointly working on with the Djiboutians. And so we have made some major investments there, and we're trying to court additional ones. I think what you mentioned on Africa's involvement is that essentially they've tried to create monopoly situations where they can control pricing and box out any other players on the supply chain, essentially is what they've engaged in through bribes, labor practices, and then price manipulation. And so what we are aggressively trying to do is ensure that U.S. companies get in. I was speaking about all of the companies that approached us at the beginning of this year to be involved in the peace process on Congo, but also to help them secure deals as part of that. And so we're working on an economic framework to achieve that.